Howdy Beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Howdy Beans podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good, as per usual. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at the fourth Pirates movie of Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides from 2011. But before we get into all of that, I want to do a bit of housekeeping because I like to keep my house, my ship, my crew all nice and tidy and all ship shape and ready for booty. So if you would want to join my crew and follow me on X at howdybeans_pod, I'd be eternally grateful. Or you can subscribe if you listen on YouTube, or like and comment. Or finally, if you're listening on Spotify, you can follow me there and you can leave a 5-star rating if you so choose. So as I said, I'm going to be looking into Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides today. To be honest, I was and ahhing about doing this movie and Salazar's Revenge, mainly because, in my opinion, the first three Pirates movies are the best Pirates movies. They are quintessentially, to me, cinema, one of the best trilogies ever. I love them all. I reviewed all of them last year, and it went down really, really well. So well, in fact, actually, kind of like my review of The Mummy that I did last year, which I have no idea as to why that film review was so successful. But my second most successful episode of all time is At World's End, and it's currently got 11,000 views on YouTube, which again I don't understand. But because it got so many views and so many people, I got so much feedback, and people came back to me and said, "Look, I loved your review. I loved, your opinions on the Pirates movies." That I thought, you know what, this summer for 2025, I'm going to look into the last two Pirates movies because it's only fair, to kind of finish it off. Even though I'm not overly excited to watch this movie and Salazar's Revenge, I'm going to do it because that is, you make. You do these sort of things, you make sacrifice, that's the word I'm looking for your art. And this is my art. And you guys, seem to really enjoy it when I talk about the Mummy movies and when I speak positively about movies. So I think it'd be interesting for when I don't speak so poorly of films. So that'd be interesting as well. Not to say that I don't like this movie. I actually prefer this movie more than the last movie. I think this is probably one of the last good ones. And then when you got Salazar's Revenge, it just falls off a steep cliff. And then it's still falling now, and it came out years ago. But we'll get there when we get there. So yeah, today we're looking at Salazar's Revenge. As for the synopsis of this movie, for anybody that doesn't know, it goes as follows. Captain Jack Sparrow crosses paths with a woman from his past, Angelica, and he's not sure if it's love or if she's a ruthless con artist who's using him to find the fabled Fountain of Youth. When she forces him aboard the Queensland Revenge, the ship of the formidable pirate Blackbeard, Jack finds himself on an unexpected adventure in which he doesn't know who to fear more, Blackbeard or the woman from his past. And that is the synopsis of the movie. As for the cast, again, as you can imagine, Johnny Depp is back as Jack Sparrow. To be honest, and I'm sure I'm going to say this when I get to Salazar's Revenge, Johnny Depp can do no wrong, in my opinion. I love him. I am a huge fan of him and his work, and I feel like he's a brilliant Jack Sparrow. But I will say this, not evidently, like here and there, and again, I'll mention it when we get to the review, but there are points in this movie where you can tell, he's being Captain Jack, and there are other points where you're like, he's really honing it in, especially in the last movie anyway. But, I digress. We'll get there when we get to the review. Again, Johnny Depp is back as Jack Sparrow. Penelope Cruz is back as Angelica. She's not back as Angelica. She never was Angelica. She is Angelica. Ian McShane is Blackbeard. Jeffrey Rush is back as Barbossa. Again, Jeffrey Rush as Barbossa is just brilliant in the role. Kevin McNally is Gibbs. Sam Claflin as Philip. Astrid Burgess Frisbee as Sinera. She is the mermaid, I believe. And Stephen Graham, who is a brilliant actor. To be honest, I'd love to see Stephen Graham as the Doctor. I think he'd be really good as Doctor Who. But again, that's a completely different video. I just want to mention it because I don't think I'd ever get a chance to mention it again. But yeah, Stephen Graham, brilliant actor. He's in this playing Scrum. And then Keith Richards is back as Captain Teague. And then you've got Richard Griffiths as King George. And, there's many more people in the cast, but those are sort of your main players in the story. As for the production, So I've split it up into development and writing. So as for development of the film, by September 2006, Mark Zoradi, president of the Walt Disney Motion Pictures Group, was quoted as saying, "The third film will conclude the initial Pirates trilogy, though it is unlikely to be the last Pirates sequel." Terry Rossio said in 2007 that a fourth film was possible, and producer Jerry Bruckheimer expressed interest in the spin off. Director Gore Verbinski concurred that all of the stories set in motion by the first film had been resolved. If there ever were another Pirates of the Caribbean film, I would start fresh and focus on the further adventures of Captain Jack Sparrow. Shortly before the premiere of Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, Bruckheimer stated it was the end of the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy, but the idea of a spin-off was still possible. After the film's successful opening, Dick Cook, then chairman of the Walt Disney Studios, said he was interested in a fourth installment. Los Angeles Times also reported that rights to a book were bought. Johnny Depp was expected to reprise his role as Captain Jack Sparrow. Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio had started working on a script in 2007, but they were interrupted by the 2007-2008 Writers Guild of America strike and only resumed in mid-2008. Before we carry on here, I just want to mention, I agree and disagree. So I think, yes, they should have started off fresh. And I think there are talks at the moment of doing a brand new Pirates of the Caribbean movie, but it'd be completely new, completely fresh, and starting off completely, from the beginning. And I think that'd be a brilliant idea. Not that, again, I don't love Jack Sparrow and I love Johnny Depp in the role. We need new characters. This is an amazing, huge world that you can do loads in. Let's get new actors, new characters in. So yes, I agree they should have started off fresh. Focusing more on the further adventures of Captain Jack Sparrow, no. Maybe Jack's origins, like a prequel, that would be interesting, and you get a little bit of it in Salazar's Revenge. But that would have been more interesting of how he was a privateer turned pirate. That'd be fascinating if they wanted to do like a younger Jack Sparrow story. That would have been great. Or a spin-off would have been good as well. But that's not how the cookies crumble in this situation. Anyway, I just wanted to throw my 2 pence in there. Carrying on, the fourth film was first announced on September 28th, 2008, during a Disney event at the Kodak Theatre with Johnny Depp and Walt Disney Studios chairman Dick Cook, with Depp in full Captain Jack Sparrow attire, while also wearing the Lone Ranger mask to announce his involvement in a Lone Ranger movie. Maybe one day I'll talk about that film because I somewhat enjoy it, but it still wasn't great. Anyway, in June of 2009, Bruckheimer indicated Disney would prefer the fourth installment of Pirates to be released before the Lone Ranger film, which was being worked on for release in the summer of 2010. He hoped original Pirates director Gore Verbinski would return for the fourth film, as his BioShock film adaptation had been put on hold. I didn't even know he was doing BioShock. That would have been great. I guess it's still on hold, or it's probably cancelled now because I haven't heard anything about that, but I would really love to see a BioShock movie. Anyway, as Verbinski was unavailable due to his commitment with Rango, another brilliant movie, the same year, Bruckheimer suggested Rob Marshall, whom he considered a premier filmmaker, stating that every film Marshall made I thought was unique and different. On July the 21st, 2009, Marshall accepted the job because of the whole new storyline and set of characters. It felt new, and that was important to me. Quote Marshall. Marshall's involvement wasn't reported until August. Marshall said the film provided him a long-awaited opportunity to work with Depp, and that his directing was helped by his experience as a choreographer. He says, quote, "The action sequences felt like big production numbers," end quote. I really had one criteria for signing on, and that was the story I could actually follow. End quote. On September the 11th, 2009, during a presentation at Disney D23 Expo, Cook and Johnny Depp, in full Captain Jack Sparrow costume, made the announcement that a fourth Pirates film was in development for a summer 2011 release. The title was announced as Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, later revealed to have been taken from the Tim Powers 1987 novel On Stranger Tides. Cook resigned in September 2009 after working for Disney for over 38 years. Depp's faith in the Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides was somewhat shaken after the resignation, with Depp explaining that there's a fissure a crack in my enthusiasm at the moment. It was all born in that office. Depp also explained Cook was one of the few who accepted his portrayal of Jack Sparrow when things went a little sideways on the first Pirates movie and others at the studio were less than enthusiastic about my interpretation of the character. Dick was there from the first moment. He trusted me. Regardless, on January the 6th, 2010, Disney announced that the film would be released on May the 20th, 2011. Director Bob Marshall visited the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in Disneyland for inspiration, eventually paying homage with a skeleton holding a magnifying glass in Ponce de Leon's ship after another ride reference scene featuring Old Bill, the pirate who tries to share his room with a cat, was also filmed but cut. Pintail and Raggedy were originally supposed to make an appearance, but director Rob Marshall opted out of the idea as he feared their roles would be cut. Yeah, I love them too. Pintail and Raggedy. They were two of my favourite occurring characters in all three of the movies. And to be honest, how big the cast is, and then trying to bring in new actors as well, I feel like they would have been cut. So I'm kind of glad he made the decision not to have them in there, because it's better to not have them and have them and not use them than use them and not have them. You know what I mean? Like I'm kind of glad about that. I'm just having a look at the moment before I move on. I don't think I know anything that Robert Marshall has done. What has he worked on? He has done Chicago. Oh, I love Chicago. Didn't know he did that. Memories of a Geisha. I want to read the book. I do want to watch that film, actually. 9, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. Oh, he did 9. Oh, not that 9. A different 9. I thought he did the movie 9. Into the Woods. That was a terrible movie. Mary Poppins Returns. That was all right. Preferred the first one. And they did the new Little Mermaid live action film, which I didn't much like because, again, I prefer the original, and I'm not a big fan of the Disney live action reboots anyway. So really the only film that I've seen apart from Pirates of the Caribbean is Chicago, and I really like Chicago. He had it coming. But then again, it's a pretty good musical, to be honest. Oh, okay then. So I just wanted to check that out. I just couldn't think of any films that he had done. Moving on to writing. So during the production of Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, and At World's End, writers Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio discovered Tim Powers' 1987 novel on Stranger Tides, which they considered a good foundation on which to base a new chapter in the Pirates series. Disney brought the rights to the novel in April 2007. In 2009, after the announcement of the film's title, which led to speculation in regards to his book, Powers insisted that Jack Sparrow and his book's main character, Jack Shandy, are totally different characters, but that it was possible that they might overlap. Blackbeard and Hector Barbossa, though felt certain the Fountain of Youth was the only thing they would hold on to due to the film's ending. Rossio stated that he and Elliott had considered using Blackbeard and the Fountain of Youth in the story. But whenever you say those words, Powers' novel comes to mind. There was no way we could work in that field without going into territory Tim had explored. However, while taking inspiration from Powers' novel, Rossio denied that the film would be a straight version of the novel. Blackbeard came from the book, and in the book there is a daughter character too, but Jack Sparrow is not in the book, nor is Barbossa, so I wouldn't call this an adaptation. Rossio declared the script for On Stranger Tides was written to be a standalone film, kind of a James Bond sort of thing. Instead of the designed to be a trilogy structure of the previous installments, they hoped to design a story that would support new characters, knowing that previous arcs were over. The main guideline was to create a standalone story rather than a continuation of the trilogy, or the start of a new one. And then, of course, the Tim Powers book, On Stranger Tides, was a huge inspiration for characters, themes, settings, and basic storylines. Bruckheimer added that there was a decision to streamline the story a little bit, make it a little simpler, and not have as many characters to follow, as the number of characters and subplots in At World's End caused the film to have an unwieldy length. I disagree. I think it was long enough. Anyway, the duo decided to employ another sea myth alluded to in the previous episodes, mermaids, which are briefly referenced as succubi, female demons that weirdly and erotically occurred the last hours of men marooned on barren islands. In the fourth chapter of the book, the mermaid's role expanded in the film script, which included a vast attack sequence. Depp was deeply involved with the story design, frequently meeting the writers to show what he was interested in doing, and in the words of Rossio, being quote, involved in coming up with storylines, connecting characters, creating moments that we would then fashion, shape, and then go on back. End quote. Among Depp's suggestions were turning Philip into a missionary and having a Spanish um, um, contingent following the protagonists. Afterwards, Rob Marshall and executive producer John DeLuca met Rossio and Elliot and did alterations of their own, including building the female lead. And that is the lot of the production. So yeah, my memories of this one are that I remember going to cinema to watch it, and I remember being really, really excited. And because again, I love the first three movies, and I remember going to cinemas to watch at World's End and just being in awe of watching a movie like this in the cinemas. It was just brilliant. And I remember 2011, I think I went with my mom, or my mom and my dad. I can't really remember. But I remember we went, and I was excited, and we went and we watched it, and I remember just liking it, but at the same stage coming out being a little disappointed. Like, none of the characters that I loved and enjoyed were there, and I understood at the time that you needed new characters because a lot of the story beats was over. But I don't know. I liked the adventure. I liked Captain Jack. It just felt a little bit sort of a bit confusing. Like they couldn't decide what it wanted to do, what it wanted to be. You know, like I remember the start of the movie. You're in London and you're in like an old timey version of London, and then you go to meet King George, which is kind of cool. But you can tell at the same stage, like I don't know. It's just I can't really explain it. It's just Depp just looked older. Like he just looked a lot older. And I guess I know people age, but considering how he looked in like at World's End, and then you look at him here, you're like, is this movie set a year or two later? Or is it set years later? Because Depp does look a bit old. And I think just seemed just a bit odd, a bit strange to me. I still enjoy it. And it's still a film that I'd happily sit and watch. I just don't enjoy it as much as the first three. And this is where I kind of come to the part where I sit and think, well, would it have been better to go, look, we've done the Pirates movies, we've done the trilogy, we're gonna end all the characters there because all their stories end. Captain Jack, he goes off with the map and he goes on his own adventures, and you can say Captain Jack's out there doing adventures, that's fine, and sort of move on there. And then you could do prequels, or you could do spin-offs, or you could get brand new characters. You know, you could have do if he wanted to, and again, it depends if the audiences would have liked it. I wouldn't have minded it, but you could have done like learning about Barbossa. You could have done a whole prequel series or trilogy, or even just standalone movie about Johnny Depp, about not Johnny Depp, about Jack Sparrow, about learning how Jack Sparrow became Jack Sparrow, how he became the legend, how he became a privateer, and how he went against the East Indian Trading Company and basically decided, no, people aren't cattle, I'm going to go and be a pirate. And then how he met Barbossa, a young Barbossa, and how the movie could have ended where he gets mutinied on the island, and that would then start off his sort of wanting revenge, and then that leads into Black Pearl, and you know all the movies that come after that. That could have been an interesting one. You didn't even have to bring in Johnny Depp. You could have literally brought in a new actor that kind of somewhat looked like Johnny Depp. And again, same with Barbossa. You could have got a younger guy in to play Barbossa. And, you know, you could see their dynamic of them being friends and that sort of thing. And then grow into sort of Barbossa basically betrays him, and then mutants him on an island. Like, this would have been an interesting thing. Or they could have done something completely else, but no, they wanted to keep Johnny Depp. They wanted to keep it going. Also, it's kind of a little bit concerning. I didn't know this until obviously reading the notes for the production, but knowing that Johnny Depp had a lot more say. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because sometimes when you have the actors have a lot of say of their role that they've been doing for a while, sometimes it can be all right. But then sometimes you can have moments when, again, you have certain actors that come here and say, oh, well, my character won't do this, my character won't do that. Well, let's do this, let's do that. They get too much power in the role. And that can be a real detriment to the movie. And I'm not saying it is or it isn't, because I don't know if his ideas were better than what was already sort of envisioned. because again, we'll never know. It's just the fact it's a bit worrying, isn't it, when you find out like, oh, the actor had his finger in the pie a bit too much, and he should have had it in. But who knows? Who's going to say no to Johnny Depp at the end of the day? But either way, I'm completely here for it. I'm kind of looking forward to watching this movie because I haven't watched this in a while. And again, it is a lot more tolerable than Salazar's Revenge. So I'm not as completely apprehensive as I would be for that movie. But anyway, I'm going to go off and watch this movie now. And then when I come back, we'll talk about my first impressions, the story, production design, overall thoughts, and all of that jazz. So I'll see you all in a minute. And welcome back, everybody. So I've now finished on Stranger Tides. To be honest, going straight into it, first impressions, and I am surprised that I'm going to say this, but I did enjoy it. Like this is one of the things about movies and TV and most content online nowadays is that people like to critique and like to moan, say it's not as good as what came before, it's not as good as what comes after, all these reboots, sequels, and all this jazz. But really, I feel like at the end of the day, we have lost this idea and concept of what the movies are about, or what cinema is about. It's about just going to be entertained. It's entertainment, and that's what it is, pure and simple. And I feel like if you come out of something and you're entertained, whether if you liked it fully or not, if you still come out entertained, then that movie's done its job, whether it was good or bad. And that's how I feel with this film, is the fact of at the end of it, I came out entertained. I had fun. I enjoyed it. Granted, I feel like it shouldn't have been 2 hours long. At times it feels a bit convoluted. There are moments where I'm like, okay, there's too much things going on. There's too many side plots and things going on. Like it really needed to condense. It needed to focus more on the adventure than other side things. And obviously, again, I love Jack Sparrow. I think Johnny Depp is incredible as Jack Sparrow and in the role. But there were times when I thought, okay, the story doesn't work when it's being led by Jack. Jack is a main character, but he's also a side character. He's one in the same as well. You need other sort of characters to also take up the slack to carry the movie as well, so that you can enjoy the funny side of Jack and the comedy and the cleverness of Jack, and then you can have sort of the adventure, the heartfelt moments, the moments of revenge, the moments of cruelty with like evil characters and stuff like that, as you did with the East Indian Trading Company and all of that jazz that happened in the last movies. With this one, obviously, because it's more Captain Jack led, it's more silly, it's more buffoonery. There are times where Jack seemed to be clever, but there's other times where he just feels like a fool, which I'll get into all of that when I sort of get to the story part. But I did like it. I did enjoy it. I was entertained. And I feel the same as I did when I first went to go see this movie in cinemas, of like, it's not as good as the first three movies, but it's still it's still a movie that I don't mind watching, that if it's on, I will sit and watch it. I won't stop what I'm doing if it's important, like other movies. But if I'm not really doing anything, I'm just sort of loitering around, then it's a movie I wouldn't mind sitting and watching, because at its heart, it still feels like a pirate adventure. It feels like, a movie where I can get lost for a while and just go on this adventure with these interesting characters, and that's my sort of overall first impressions, is the fact of coming to it off the first three movies. It's not as good, but I still enjoyed my stuff. I still was entertained, and I still laughed and giggled and was interested in the story. So yeah, I don't feel like it is bad, and it's not as sort of down on the list as I thought it was going to be when I was sort of planning on watching it. Because I was apprehensive. I was like, maybe this movie hasn't aged as much as I remember, because I was young when I first watched it, and I was still coming off the high off World's End. So, me being young and hopeful, being a very small being, going into that movie and hoping that it would be what I enjoyed and loved. And I can't really remember in my memories much of how I felt coming out of it. I just remember coming out of it and just liking it, but it not being what I remember it or hoped it would be like. So I was apprehensive going into it, and to come out of it surprised is not bad. It's pretty good, to be honest. I'm glad I came out surprised because I was worried going into this, guys were going to come out and be like, guys, this ain't it. So it's a good adventure. I enjoyed it. I was entertained. And for that, I can't really knock it, to be honest. As for the story, so it kind of follows on from the end of At World's End. To give anybody up to speed who hasn't seen that movie in a long time or hasn't seen it, the long and short of it, at the very end of that movie, Barbossa's on the ship with his crew and is like, where to next? And Barbossa pulls out the map, puts it down and realizes there's a big hole missing out of the middle of the map. And then it cuts to Jack in a little boat, in a little sort of dinghy, sailing off. And then he looks out at the map, and then as he's twizzling it around, it says the Fountain of Youth, and then it cuts, right? And this movie sort of carries on from that. Years later, Jack, he's lost. He hasn't got a crew. He hasn't got a ship. He can't find the Fountain of Youth. He's basically given up. And it turns out that there is somebody in London who is impersonating him and saying they're going to get a crew together. So he decides to kind of jump aboard, go on there to find out who's impersonating him, steal the crew, do a mutiny, and sort of take the ship for himself, and then go ahead and carry on his quest for the Fountain of Youth. Turns out it's the Queensland Revenge, it's Blackbeard, and from there the adventure goes on with mermaids and zombie sort of voodoo magic, and you got the Spanish in the background. Barbossa's back, but this time he's a privateer working for the British monarchy, the crown, King George, I believe it is. And you've also got Angelica, which is the new love interest of Captain Jack, who she was young, she was going to go into a convent, and Jack sort of coerced her, persuaded her to not do that, and as she says, took advantage. And that's their sort of backstory. You do learn a bit more, but then like sort of the adventure goes on, and we find out about Ponce de Leon and the chalices and how it all links to the Fountain of Youth, and it's a fun adventure. And like I said, it's based off a book on Stranger Tides with the idea and concept behind Blackbeard and all that. And I feel like when the story focuses on the whole idea of the Fountain of Youth, of Blackbeard, of going on this quest, on this journey across the sea to this island to find the Fountain of Youth, when it does that, I love it. It's brilliant. And I love how this movie begins. The movie begins with you're on the sea, it's black, you've got these trawlers, and they trawl up basically a body of this old, decrepit man. He looks ancient, but he's still alive. And he's clutching a book, and they take him to see the Spanish king at the time, which I don't know who it is. They probably do mention it, but I can't remember the name. Go from Spanish king, and he basically like, this guy, he served on the crew of Ponce de Leon, which was like 200 years ago. How is it that he's still alive? And then the Spanish are like, we have to do our quest to find the Fountain of Youth as soon as possible. And it goes like that. And I love that because it really gets you into the mystery of like, yes, this feels a lot more bigger, more grander, feels like a bigger worldly sort of adventure. It's not just, pirates, it's the Spanish, it's the British, it's, two warring enemies going against each other to find the quest of eternal youth. That's fascinating, and sort of as the movie goes on, you sort of meet Captain Jack again, and obviously seeing Jack and seeing Johnny Depp in the role again, it was wonderful. And like, there's a great moment, and I had to write it down because I didn't want to forget it. There's a great moment when Jack has been captured by the King of England, and he's in the chair and he's shackled down, and he's trying his best to kind of get towards the table so he can have sort of something to eat off the table, because it's a huge banquet, and obviously George was known for being a glutton. He was a big chap. He was a big boy, and Jack's trying to get to this table, trying to get the food, but every time he tries to get it, he misses, or he just can't reach it. And what I love about it is how this scene is shot, and I didn't notice it till watching it again for this review, was the fact of every now and then the camera takes the eyes of Jack. It pretends like through the camera you are looking through the eyes of Jack Sparrow, and he's looking up at the balcony, he's looking up at the window, he's looking up at the ceiling, and he's moving the chair and things like that. And you don't notice it until it happens. And it's just one of those where you can tell, and these are the clever parts of Captain Jack, where you can see he's looking around, looking just for ways to escape. Like, how will I get out of here? And then he makes his escape, and everything that the camera focused on he does. When he looked at the chandelier, he uses that and he swings on it. He moves the chair so that he can, if somebody runs at him, he can pull it in front of them and they fall out the window. And it's really well choreographed and so well done. And it's those little moments I'm like, okay, that's Captain Jack. And this was one of my biggest critiques in the last sort of 3 movies, was the fact of, in Black Pearl, Jack, he is a legend. He is like a pirate legend. He's like up there with like Blackbeard and that. He is one of those sort of pirates where there's such a myth around him. And when you meet him, you realize he is smart, he is clever, he's dangerous, he's a man out for revenge, he's a man on a mission. And he's so well done and so well played that you believe that he is a legend. And even though he makes up as he goes along, he doesn't plan anything. He just, a lot of the time, is just sporadic. It is like a spur of the moment, and he just happens to get really, really lucky. Even then, you're still like, that is one of like the best pirates I've ever seen. And then you get the next 2 movies. And again, even though I hold my hand on my heart and I say I love those 2 movies and I love Jack in those 2 movies, as the films went on, specifically the second and the third one, you lose a lot of that cleverness. You lose a lot of that smart Captain Jack, and you get a lot of the silly, the buffoonery, the kind of he just gets lucky sort of thing, kind of like the drunken sailor, drunken master sort of thing. Like, he is a master, he's very talented and very dangerous, but at the same stage, he's drunk. He's a bit of a fool. He's not. He's a bit, whoa. You know what I mean? One of them. And I don't mind that as a character evolution. But once you get the perfection of the first movie, you would like to keep that for the remainder of the rest of the films. And so when you get here, and it's really evident in the last movie, Salazar's Revenge, which sadly we're going to get to next event sometime, hopefully not soon, but eventually. In this one and that one, you see less of the cleverness. It's kind of just him just being a buffoon, him just being silly, and him just sort of just being a version of Captain Jack that is just a clown, really. And it's a bit sad to see. And I don't know if it's Johnny Depp sort of giving up on the role, or his sort of him losing faith or confidence in the movie after one of the producers left. I don't know. It could be a mountain of things, or it could just be the fact of Johnny Depp just wants to have fun in the role, so he's just having fun. It could be that. It could be many things. Again, I don't know. I'm not Johnny Depp. But it's just one of those where it's like, he used to be so clever. And I love that little small moment where he was clever. And then the rest of the movie, he's a little bit clever, not so clever. But he reminds me of Columbo, where it's like, you think he's stupid, but really he's a genius. And those small moments, and they do happen in this movie. But when you see the small moments, you do appreciate them. It's like, oh, okay, he's not actually a clown. He actually is quite clever, or lucky, or whatever you want to say. But it works in his favor, and it's still an adventure. You still have fun with it. Like, it isn't an issue. It's still one of those where it's like, yeah, he's a bit of a clown, bit of a buffoon, but it's fun. You can enjoy it. And for me, I have done. But yeah, the story's interesting. Like I said, the Spanish part, I feel like is interesting, but it's not used enough. You see them at the beginning. You see them a little bit as they're sailing towards the island, and like Barbossa's on his ship, and these men are trying to attack. And he's like, look, the guy's not even looking at us. We're not the target. He doesn't even want to waste time on us. The main target is the fountain. So let's make sail and let's head towards the fountain. And then you see them again when they're in a camp. And then at the very, very end, they appear while they're all fighting at the fountain, and then they take the chalices. Like, for some unknown reason, like, granted, like, there are a lot of Spanish soldiers there, but there's not many. Like, there's still a lot of pirates there, both like with the English, what are left of the English sailors, as well as the pirates. There's still enough of them to take on sort of the Spanish, but they all just stop and sort of in awe of, like, it's kind of like that fact that Ibby's just frozen. And as the Spanish guy comes in, he's like, he takes the chalices off Angelica, and he's like, oh, only God can grant eternal life, and that not from these pagan waters. And he smashes the chalices, breaks them, throws them in one of the deep pools, and then gets his men to tear the fountain down. And everybody just stares and watches this guy do it. Not one person, apart from one guy, actually. He ends up getting with like the Union Jack and the flag, and he goes, I claim this land for King George. And I found it kind of funny, actually. The Spanish guy shoots him, and he looks to his men as like, somebody note down that man's bravery. I'm like, that fair enough. The Spanish can be quite honourable. But that little scene made me laugh. But that was the only time. And then they go to pull it down, and then they do something once they're pulling it down and destroying the fountain, and then Blackbeard's like zombie sort of voodoo sort of captains then start to actually do anything about it. But up until then, I'm like, it feels very silly. It feels wasted. It feels like the Spanish are there, they're interesting. There's so much they could have done with them, and if I feel like if they would have trimmed a lot of the fat, they would have been able to do that and trim down the runtime. You could have focused more on the Spanish side of it, and the Spanish characters. Like we did, we had those scenes with like Elizabeth and Governor Swan with the East Indian Trading Company. In those moments with Norrington and Davy Jones, those moments where you didn't focus on Jack Sparrow and the main cast. This was like other things was happening while they're on like doing what they were doing. And it adds more to the world building, adds more to the story, to the characters, to why you should hate the East Indian Trading Company and stuff like that. And it should have been like that. It should be, in fact, you have the Spanish there, have the Spanish like have them talk to each other, have them have moments where you have Barbosa being captured and he's talking to the leader of this group of Spanish soldiers and stuff like that. Like, it would have been interesting to have those extra bits of moments. It just feels like they came, they went, and that was it. It feels a bit of a letdown, to be honest. It was interesting having Blackbeard. I love that. I love the fact of having Blackbeard. I do question as to why Blackbeard wasn't in the last movie, and that was the good question I had when I was younger and I first watched it. It was like, shouldn't at least be Blackbeard one of the pirate lords, unless he feels like he's too good for them, or that because he's the pirate that all pirate fears, he doesn't need to be a pirate lord. He just knows who and what he is, and the rest of the pirates leave him alone. Like, they wouldn't dare like go against him or anything like that. Possibly, I don't know. But it would make sense as to have Blackbeard as a pirate lord, or at least the pirate king, because again, if you're going to have somebody who is going to be the king of the pirates, you're going to be somebody that is feared. And who else do pirates fear more than any other pirate than Blackbeard? But I loved Blackbeard. I loved the betrayal. I can't remember the actor's name at the top of my head now, but I loved his betrayal of Blackbeard. I loved the idea that the ship is alive. And it adds to the myth, because we don't really know anything about Blackbeard. And this is the wonderful thing about the character. This is what I would love a movie on Blackbeard or something like that, because there's such a mystery around him that he, if anything, with Blackbeard, he is the epitome of a legend. He came and he went. He came and there was such a mystery about him. He used to light his beard on fire and have it smolder, but so it used to have that fear of a worldly creepiness. He was a legend in himself. And if we didn't know he actually existed, you would think he was just a story, but the man did. And we don't know so much about him, about what his life was like before he was a pirate. And I find that idea behind it is like, there's so much you could do with a character like that. You could do, and they did with this movie, and they had the whole voodoo magic and how that he was very clever and he was very mischievous, but he was also mad and he was cruel. And there were moments where it's like you don't know where you stood with him. He was very much like this act of, you could be his best friend, but you don't know if he's like laughing at you, but really he's going to stab you in the back, that sort of thing. So you never knew where you stood with him. But again, I feel like we didn't get enough time with him. We didn't get enough moments with learning about with Blackbeard. And this is the pointers I want to get into, is the fact of this movie was in need of Ozempic and quick. It needed the fat to be trimmed. It needed to lose weight. There's no reason this movie should have been 2 hours and 21 minutes with 13 minutes of credits. I get it. It's a big movie, big production, a lot of people on it. It didn't need to be this long. What they should have done with this film, as I said, is streamline it. Focus on the adventure. Bring in, so have the beginning as it is, where Jack's in London. He gets tricked onto the ship of Blackbeard, because that did happen a lot. There is a name for it, but I forgot. But during the time of pirating and stuff like that, again, I wish I remembered the name. But basically, the long and short of it is the fact of a sailor or a bloke or anybody really would get absolutely bladdered. They'd get drunk as a skunk, right? And they would go to these taverns and they'd pass out. And what would happen would be pirates would come, kidnap them, take them while they were passed out, put them on their ship, and that was it. it was like they would steal people, they'd kidnap people who were drunk, or they would coerce people into getting drunk. They'd be like, "Oh, come have a drink with us." So they'd get you drunk. You'd have a drink or two. You have no cohesion, what's going on at all. They would then steal you, and that was it. You were basically stuck on the ship forever. You know, it did happen. It happened a lot. I wish I remembered the name for it. There was a name for it specifically, but I can't remember. But that happened to Jack, where he was there in the pub. Granted, he got a blow dart in the neck, but still he woke up 5 days later and he's now part of the crew of Blackbeard's ship, and that's it. He's stuck there, but stick with that. Keep that in the story. Get rid of sort of the parts where you focus too much on Jack. Like, don't get me wrong, Jack is important. He should be there, but there's too many moments where Jack's just he's not really doing anything. He's just being a buffoon, really. He's just being silly. Get rid of that. Focus moments on Barbossa and his backstory of what happened to the Pearl, because we don't really find out what happened to him and the Pearl till nearly to the end of the movie. Focus on that. Focus on the Spanish. Give me a reason to tell me, because you keep telling me that you can't let the Spanish get you. The Spanish are beating them. The Spanish are here. The Spanish are there. The Spanish are dangerous. Blah blah blah. You keep saying this, but you don't really you're not showing it. Show more of that. There's a moment where Jack finds Ponce de Leon's ship, right? And again, this is the thing, what confuses me is the fact of the Spanish are already ahead. The British are able to catch up Barbossa's ship, which we see that because, again, he sees them and they're neck and neck. They're literally next to each other, right? So the Spanish somehow get there first. Then once they've got to the island, because again, they're not looking for mermaids, so they're not sort of waiting around for mermaids as if Barbossa and Blackbeard are. So they get there first. They set up camp. They find Ponce de Leon's ship first, and they remove the chalices, which then we find when Barbossa and Jack find the ship and they find the case that it's got rocks in it. So they've already been there. And then you get to the camp, Jack and Barbossa, they steal the chalices, and then they get to the fountain, and then the Spanish turn up at the end, and then they leave. I would like more moments with the Spanish. What's going on their ship? What are they talking about? What is their goal? Because we actually don't really know what their goal is. We think they're going to get the chalices to take it. And you don't find out to the end of the movie that they've come to destroy the fountain, which, again, fine, but give me some backstory as to why they want to do it. Is it because is it the Christianity? Is it because of the religion? Is it because of the belief? Is it, why? What were the orders by the king? Just a little bit more, just a bit more back and forth. We'll have moments between Barbossa and the leader of the Spanish, of him and the Barbossa talking of look, Barbossa saying, look, I don't want to quarrel with you. I don't care. I'm not here for the fountain. I don't want that. I'm after Blackbeard. He is my sort of end goal. So set me free. Or even have a moment where Jack, because Jack was mutinied on the island on the first film. And he goes to shoot Will, and he's like, look, this bullet wasn't meant for you. And we find out in the movie that bullet was meant for Barbossa. That is the pistol that Barbossa left him with to kill himself with on the island. And again, that's incredible. Real deep backstory that is told very early, hinted at very early on. And then, you get the reveal at the end. You could have had that with Barbossa, because through the movie, he's getting these poison frogs and he's dipping it and he's poisoning his sword. And he could say, look, I don't want to fight you because this sword is not meant for you. This venomous tip, this venomous sword, or whatever your fancy word you want to use it, is not meant for you. I don't want to have to use it on you because it'd be wasted. It's for him, little things like that. Really flesh out the characters, the world, trim it back a bit. I love the bit with the mermaids. That was great. Keep that in. But just trim a lot of the excess and just focus more. I think generally they could have got this movie to maybe an hour 45, really, at best, an hour and a half, possibly. I think there was a lot of things they just could have trimmed out, and I think it would have been better. But it's still good. It's still a great adventure. But yeah, it just really needed Ozempic. It needed a shot on the arm to trim the fat, lose the weight, and be a lot more streamlined and quicker movie. Because the last films needed to be so long because they had so many storylines that all worked. Like none of them, not one storyline was wasted, but they had so many storylines that needed to be closed that those movies warranted such long run times. And again, as I said in those reviews, yes, they are long movies, but you don't notice it because there's so much going on. There's so much story. There's so many characters. I think there's adventure. There's fun. The pacing's done right. That you don't mind that those movies are almost like 3 hours long. You just go for the adventure, you go for the journey. Whereas this film, it's a standalone. It doesn't need to be 2 hours long. It's a standalone film with Captain Jack. Streamline it, done. You know, again, that's my feelings. But yeah, that is sort of as for the story. Again, production design, all that great. I love the design of the Queen's Anne's Revenge. Again, because the Queen Anne's Revenge is a huge galleon. It was a huge ship because it was a slave ship. And again, it needed to be so big because it needed to protect itself, but also it needed to carry a lot of slaves. And Blackbeard procured the ship. I think it was called the Queen Anne, and then he changed it to the Queen's Anne's Revenge. And that was his legendary ship. But again, I love the idea that he has black magic, that he has this magic sword, and that he can control his ship, but also he controlled the Black Pearl, and was making the Black Pearl come alive, and he sunk the Black. Well, he says sunk the Black Pearl. He puts it into a jar, which again I love the visual of. Because again, you have those little boats in jars, which I've always wondered how they do those things with glass bottles. But yeah, you've got, and it's in the Black Pearl's in it, and it's moving. You got little Jack the monkey, and I love that. I love that visual. I love that idea and concept behind it. I don't know how it works, but it doesn't matter. It's cool. It's part of the mystery and legend of Blackbeard that he could do something like that. Like, yes, you believe it because why wouldn't you? You know, he's a legend. So yeah, I love that. Again, production design was great. All the characters look fantastic. A lot of on-set location, which again, I love a bit of on-set location as much as possible. They filmed a lot in London as well. Yeah, I thought it was great. I really, really enjoyed this movie. And this is coming to my overall thoughts, is the fact of I was entertained. Granted, yes, like I said, there are certain parts where it was a bit too long. It was a bit too many things going on. Like, you know, you've got the whole priest thing, which again, I like the character of the priest, of the chaplain or whatever he's called, where he's saying to Blackbeard, like, you know, I pray for all the men's lives on this ship, even yours, that you will see the light and that you will not, you will be spared. And stuff like that. Like I like the idea of it, and it was Johnny Depp's idea to have this character in the story. But then you have the moments when he's with the mermaid, and it's like, okay, those are very somber moments, but like I feel like they could have been trimmed a bit because nothing really, really pays off. It's just the fact if he just falls in love, and that's just a way of getting a tear out of her, you know. Which again, I get it, it works, but it's just one of those where it's like, it was interesting character, but I just felt like a little bit should have been taken off the top, trimmed it down a bit more. And that's my sort of overall feelings of this movie. It just needed trimming. It's not a bad film. It just needs some of the fat trimmed here and there. And then I feel like it'd be a lot more streamlined sort of movie. And I do like the end sort of payoff for him, where it's like he's alive, and the mermaid is like, I can save you, all you gotta do is ask. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I've always thought this since the first I watched it, is she lying to him? Is she playing this big long game? She knows what she is. She knows who she is. She knows the effects she has on men, because that is what a mermaid does. They lure you in with beauty and eyes, and then they pull you in, and then just as you're about to kiss them, they pull you into the water and strip you to your bone, and then you're dead, right? And is this like a long game for her? Is she drawing him, knowing what she is and who she is? She's drawing him in with her beauty, with her sort of innocence. And then, because he even says, like, oh, you saved me. I'm like, no, I don't think she saved you. I think she was going to grab your leg, but because the explosion happened, she ran away. She ended up getting trapped, and then you ended up falling over, just barely missing. So it's not really that she saved you, but you want to believe she saved you because she's beautiful, because she's gorgeous, because she bats her eyelids at you. And it's that thing at the end where Scrum does say of legend's been said that one kiss from a mermaid will save a sailor from drowning, and she does kiss him, and as she kisses him, she pulls him under, and then they go into these deep pools and deep into the ocean. And I always sort of okay, is she taking him deep? and he won't drown, but will she eat him, or is she going to turn him into a mermaid? I thought, well, maybe we're going to find out in the sequel if they do sequel. Because again, I was very hopeful for a sequel before Salazar's Revenge. Like I wanted more because again, I was young and silly, and we never get any payoff for it. It's just the fact of they kiss, she pulls him down, that's it. It's kind of like it was a way of like I feel they were just trying to sort of end that storyline really. Because again, before that, she comes up and she finds the chalices, she gives the chalices to Jack, and she's like, "Don't waste my tear." And then she swims away, and then she goes saves the boy, and goes like, "Was she a good mermaid? Was she not? Was she just like stuck in this situation?" Meets this lad, realizes he's not like all the others, does fall in love with him, and then saves his life, or what? Like, how does it work? I don't know. Like I said, it's not an issue. It's just these few things where you sit there and you go, okay, that okay. But it's one of these things of like, if they had more time to flush out these bits, if they would have cut out some parts and had time to focus on these other moments, you wouldn't feel like I am, where you're like, okay, hold on, what, why, So yeah, overall, I don't hate this movie. I don't think it's bad. I prefer the first three films. They are the best. And admittedly, I will say that it should have ended at those movies. And if they were going to do another Pirates movie, it should have, if anything, it should have been a prequel. If they wanted to keep Captain Jack, then, it should have been the history of Captain Jack when he was young, when he was a privateer, all the problems he had with the East Indian Trading Company, how he met Barbossa, how he got the Black Pearl, how the Black Pearl became the Black Pearl, blah, 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 how he met David Jones. Like, that's what that should have been. It should have been one or maybe two, but I thought that they could have probably done it in one movie of finding out who the origins of Captain Jack and all that. And then when it ended, it ends with him getting marooned on an island, and that starts up the beginning of Black Pearl. That's what they could have done. Probably what they should have done, but they didn't. And this is where we are now. But even so, I still enjoy it. As a standalone, it works. It just needs a bit of trimming on the sides. That is all. And if they do the trimming, I feel like the movie is a bit more sort of enjoyable. It's a bit more entertaining than it is. But I was still entertained. So yeah, that's my sort of overall thoughts. Before we come to the end of the review, as I do with all the movies that I've been watching lately, I always go onto X. You should be following me on X, HowdyBeans_pod, because I posted on there letting everybody know that I am currently going to be watching Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. Let me know your thoughts and feelings, and did people let me know their thoughts and feelings? Again, if you want to be involved, if you want to shout out on the episode, if you want to sort of give your thoughts to whatever it is I'm watching, then by all means, whenever you follow me on X and you ever see me post anything that I'm currently watching, just comment down below and I will shout you out on the episode. So the first one we had was from Scare and Sam podcast. They go, aside from the original, my favourite Depp performance as Jack Sparrow, the film allows his character to shine. It's a shame the story is bloated with too many subplots and side characters, as this was the one I was most excited for. I agree. There are moments where Jack gets to shine, like there are, but there are other moments where you just feel like he's just a bit of a clown, really. Like he's good, but at the same stage, it's like, what happened to the Jack that was in the last movies? What happened to the Jack that was in the first film? You start to question that, and it's a shame. And I've said this before. I don't know if I said this with the Pirates movies, but you shouldn't live long enough to see the legend die. And what I mean, like, you shouldn't grow up with characters. And what I mean by that is the fact of 2004 was when the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie came out. I was little. I was just starting primary school. I was very, very young. So I grew up with the Pirates movies. The Pirates were ingrained in my childhood, and I had Pirates toys, and I had other movies. And again, I'm not going to get into it, but if you heard those reviews, you know how much I love Pirates, and I still love Pirates now, and I love those movies and characters, right? But I grew up with Captain Jack. I saw the evolution of his character in the first three movies. And then watching this film, and then watching Salazar's Revenge, the final film, and being so disappointed and let down, and this is the thing, like, you should never meet your heroes. You should never, grow up with them. You should have them at a certain age, and then they stay in the past. You shouldn't keep growing up with them. And I feel like the more that I grew up, the more I saw the character change, and I didn't like what I was seeing. And when I got to Salazar's Revenge, I was so disappointed and so put down. I was just like, I'm just done. I'm so just bummed out, and I was. So here he has chances to shine, but I can see that he's getting close to being treated as a bit of a clown, and it's a shame. Not so much as in the last film, but it's there, and it's one of those where it's like I wish I noticed it at the time, but I didn't. But yeah, too many subplots, too many side characters. There was too much things going on. Like I remember watching the trailer for this and being just enthralled in the story, and I feel like if they cut out a lot of side characters, a lot of subplots, and streamlined it, it would have worked. And so I'm glad somebody else agrees with me there. Then we have Dissect That Film podcast. They say it's simple. The movie you focus on, they say it's simple. The more you focus on Jack, the more the story suffers. It's the worst in the franchise because the plot is boring, and Ian McShane looks checked out as Blackbeard. I agree with the Jack thing. I agree that the more that you focus on Jack, the more the story sort of suffers. And again, as I said, they should have focused more on the Spanish, on Barbosa, on those side characters, on those sort of story plots. That should have been more of the focus. And then you should have had Jack in the background, as you did in the last three movies. Jack was there, and he was important, and he was a main character, but it was everything else that drove it as well. It was like Davy Jones, it was Elizabeth, it was Will, it was all of those stuff going on, which kind of made the story like so huge, but so much going on. And I feel like when you focus on Jack, you start to notice again these clowny bits, these silly parts of like, oh, is this what he's always been like? Have I just never had enough time with him to notice it? You know what I mean? As for McShane, I kind of disagree. I feel like he seems like, well, again, I don't know because I'm not McShane. I feel like he seems like he's checked out because Blackbeard is a very sort of crazy, delusional, sort of out there sort of character. So he kind of, my interpretation, he sees himself above everybody else. So it's that fact of, why should I be cohesion when like the rest of the world, I'm numb to the rest of the world. Like I don't care. I have one goal, which is to prolong my life with the Fountain of Youth, and that's it. Really, like I don't really care, So I feel like he portrays it as being checked out because the character's checked out, and again, I think it adds to the fact of we don't know a lot about Captain Blackbeard. So again, yes, you could say he was always checked out, but this is an interpretation of him. So I don't know. There's many things you can say, but I can see where you're coming from. It does seem like he's checked out. I don't think he is. I think that is just part of that version of that character, potentially. But who's to say? But I get where you're coming from. He then goes on to say, I'd say last movie is the worst in the series, which is Salazar's Revenge, with the blowing part and Jack just being a complete fool. I'd say here the movie is tolerable, but has a lot of too many ideas all at once. Then they reply back saying, see, it's the opposite for me. The inclusion of other main characters in Dead Man Tells No Tales made it better for me. And Stranger Tides primarily focuses on Jack, and it just doesn't work. Blackbeard was a legendary pilot, and McShane was severely miscast. Yeah, I can see that. I can see where you're coming from. I don't think he was miscast. I think he was rightly cast. I think just how he played the character. But again, everybody has their own opinions, and I greatly appreciate Dissect That Film because they're a brilliant podcast. If you haven't checked them out, please do. But yeah, I respect everybody's opinion. As for the next one, they went Nostalgia Cast. They said these movies, and this is in sort of big capital letters, so I'm going to have to raise my voice a bit. They say these movies do not work if Jack is the main focus. Yeah, I agree with it. I completely agree with that. It doesn't. They really don't work. If Jack is the main focus, these stories just don't work, and it's a shame. It really is, but it's true. Jack is a main character, but he shouldn't be the main character. He should be a main supporting character. Yes, he's always at the front of the poster because he's Johnny Depp, and because that's what you would advertise him in the front of the poster. But you have amazing actors around him to prop him up. So Yeah. Then you've got Desert of the Real podcast. They say it is crazy that this movie is still one of the most expensive films ever made. It looks and feels like they tried to scale it down. It has one of the most anticlimactic endings I can think of, and Jack doesn't work as well when he's the only main character. Yeah, this movie is incredibly expensive. It's probably one of the most expensive movies ever made, and that's because a lot of it is shot on location, and on location shooting is incredibly expensive. That's why many movies don't do it anymore. Um, and they did try to scale this down. As I sort of read in the introduction when I was talking about the production, the idea was to scale this movie down, but it doesn't feel like they did. It feels like, if anything, they tried to go as big as last movies. And again, I feel like that blow, that trying to scale it down, but also trying to do big bombastic things, added to the bloat, added to the runtime. And again, it comes down to the fact of you just got to trim the fat. And I feel like I'm a broken record, but it's nice to know people are agreeing with me. It's not just me being delusional. In fact, if you just trim the bloat, trim the fat, and take and like really focus on the main idea. The main idea was to scale it down and just focus on one adventure, not huge branching storylines. It was just one adventure. If they'd done that, I feel like it would have worked better and would have been probably loved and appreciated a lot more by audiences. As for sort of the ending, again, I admit the ending is very anticlimactic. I love the visuals where Jack has got Barbosa and Angelica, like they're both dying, and the idea is one person needs to sacrifice themselves. And I love the idea of it, is the fact of if it was me and somebody else, and I decided to sacrifice myself for somebody else, then I would die, but they would get my 27 years that I've lived and more. Or is it the years that I've lived already? I'm not sure. But anyway, they would get my years that I've lived. And then I would die and they would live forever, or however extra long. Like, I don't think you live forever. I think you just get the extra years, which then makes me think that guy that survived the Ponce de Leon's, like the crew member, like he's about 200 or so years old. For him to live that long, he would have had to sacrifice each one of his crew. Logically speaking, if you think of it actually, and now I'm just thinking about it, like that would have been awesome to see. The fact of this guy, he could have been this old, he could be like young, ruthless person that tricked everybody in giving his life so he could survive. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was like they all sacrificed themselves to give one guy all these extra years so he could get back to Spain and tell the king about what they had found, what they discovered. And then, that starts a mystery. That would have been fascinating to see. Like I like the introduction already, but think of that would have been a cool introduction. You wouldn't even have to have any speaking roles. It could have all just been visual, that you could just like visually sort of saw it. Like kind of like the beginning of the third movie, where it's a bit of a musical, where like you've got the pirates, both young and old, being marched, then hanged, and then you've got that young boy saying "Never Say Die," um, singing the old sea shanty. Really gripping, really brutal beginning of a movie. But they could have done that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it just would have added more to the world building. And now I think about it as like, yeah, they could have gone the dark path, or they could have gone the path of this guy was sort of voted as the survivor, so all the rest sacrificed themselves. I don't know. But yeah, the ending, anticlimactic. There's a lot more they could have done. But I love the visuals when Blackbeard basically sacrifices his daughter, or thinks he's sacrificing his daughter, takes the chalice. Angelica drinks hers, and it turns out Jack had switched the cups or had lied. And this moment where you've got Blackbeard, his skin's being ripped off him, and he's going from like human to like a meat sack to a skeleton. It's really terrifying and really creepy and awesome visual. And it reminds me somewhat of the visuals from the first movie when you got to see the undead crew of the Black Pearl. But yeah, then again, it just ends. And it's like, okay, we've got a few loose threads. Jack puts Angelica on an island, maroons her. And then you've got the guy with the mermaid. He gets taken away underwater. Who knows whatever happens to him? We never see him ever again. And again, a bit of a wasted character. Then we get the moment with Jack and Master Gibbs. And Master Gibbs has basically got into the Queensland Revenge, stolen all the ships and bottles, including the Black Pearl. Jack basically goes, okay, how are we going to get out? I don't know. Like, we're going to have to find a man with three goats, a horn, and somebody to do the old woo. I'm doing you can't see audio, but Jack's doing like the sort of Jack sort of hands where he puts them in the end, woo, that sort of thing. You know what I'm talking about if you've seen these movies. And that's it, really. They go off into the sunset and it's over. And it's like, okay, that's a bit anticlimactic, But okay, so yeah, a very anticlimactic ending, to be honest. And then finally, we have from Cold Case Kansas podcast. They basically put a GIF of one of my favorite scenes and my favorite improvised scenes in any movie. Is when you've got Johnny Depp in the last movie, and he's like, "I got a jar of dirt," and I just love that. It's great. And that's everything. That's all. Yeah, that's all the comments. So again, thank you to everybody who has who commented and comments on anything that I post on X. Again, if you want to be part of it, if you want to be shouted out, then please do follow me on Twitter at howdybeans_pod to be involved whenever I do those things. But yeah, this movie, it's an interesting one. I do enjoy it. It's just like I said, there's just so much going on. There's so much bloat that I feel like it just needs trimming. It just needs the fat to be trimmed, and then I feel like it would be a lot more enjoyable movie than it is. Focus more on side characters. Again, that's what it's meant to be. It feels like this movie is bigger than it's meant to be. It feels like they were trying to do another trilogy out of one film. That's what it feels like to me. It's like, oh, we're going to get all these story threads, all these extra characters, all this and that. And I'm like, well, it's meant to be a standalone. Treat it as such. Don't treat it as you're trying to make a big grand thing of it. Like the first Pirates movie. It works as a standalone. I am glad that we got sequels, but really, if you watch The Black Pearl on its own, you don't need a sequel. You don't need to know what happens next because it's a contained movie. It has a beginning, middle, and end. And that's it. And then we got lucky enough that movie did well, and then we got to see more. Whereas this film is the fact of it's a standalone, but it feels like they wanted to keep it small, but also they went huge at the same time, and that they were making it to feel like, oh, don't worry about these side things. We're going to do a whole new trilogy, and we're going to tell these stories, and we're going to say what happened to that guy in the well, and blah, 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 blah. But they never do, and they never did, and that wasn't the plan. So why make it like that? That's my only real sort of gripe with this film. It just feels bigger than it needs to be. It feels like it's longer than it needs to be. It's more bloated and less focused than it needs to be. It's still enjoyable. It's still an adventure. It's still fun. There's just a lot in it where I'm like, that should have been trimmed. That should have been cut. But what can I say? The movie's out. It made some money, and they made one more movie that was complete horse drop-ins. Try my best not to swear. Maybe I will for that review. But yeah, and that's where we are now. So yeah, the next one I'm going to watch, sadly, and again, it won't be for a while because I don't really want to watch it, to tell you the truth. But I will, because I promised I will. And it'd be interesting to see over all these years, after only watching it the first time, if I still feel the same. I feel like I will. To be honest, I have no faith. And I'm usually very, very positive. So if you want to see me be negative about a film, which is very rare, then quite possibly that'll be the movie for it. But yeah, so that's all I have to say now. I'm kind of rambling, so I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you very, very much for listening to my thoughts on Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. If you enjoyed this one and you haven't and you want to check out more Pirates content from me, then by all means do go back and check out on Spotify or YouTube all of the Pirates of the Caribbean reviews I've done. I've done Black Pearl, At World's End, and Dead Man's Chest. So if you want to check them out, by all means, please do. If you enjoyed this one, again, like and comment and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Also, leave a comment down below on Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating. I'm really, really close. I think I'm at 44 ratings as recording this. I need one more to get to 45. And then I'm also at 133 followers on Spotify. So if you haven't yet and you want to give me a follow, then follow me on there. And so thank you very much for listening. I've been your host, Luke the Human. It's been an absolute pleasure talking pirates with you today. I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye-bye.